For the first time, the governments of the world have a plan to reduce climate-changing greenhouse gas emissions. After 2 decades of trying, the agreement is here.
L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
The gavel that came down at the 21st UN Climate Summit wasn't the first, but Jennifer Morgan of World Resources Institute says this time it was different.
For the first time, countries have unified together, developed and developing countries, in a turning point, I think, that can really make a difference in the climate crisis.
The official text of the 21st Conference of the Parties, as it's called, is 31 pages. There are 3 key elements that we've been tracking over the last 2 weeks: ambition, adaptation, and finance. Here's how the new agreement stands up. Ambition describes attempts to limit future climate change and involves a long-term goal to bring emissions down to zero, a temperature target of no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is generally considered the point at which low-lying islands and some coastal cities would be lost. Mohammed Adaw of Christian Care says this goal is possible, though not guaranteed.
That aspiration can only be achieved if we actually communicate clearly, strongly, that everyone, businesses, stock exchanges, the policies that have been benefiting from fossil fuel actually ride the climate wave from Paris.
Also included, a 5-year ratchet mechanism which will have countries periodically review and increase their carbon-cutting efforts in 5-year cycles. Next up, the measures to help countries deal with the already unavoidable impacts of climate change, also known as adaptation. The Paris Agreement calls for all nations, not just poor countries, to manage the impacts of climate change. The deal says that the more nations cut emissions, the less they will have to address costly impacts. Also, the Paris Agreement calls for a check-in for nations to adjust to the realities of emissions levels if they go up or down. Another key part of this agreement is loss and damage, which helps nations deal with the irreversible impacts of climate change that they can't adapt to. And the final pillar is finance, a long-time sticking point between wealthy and poor countries. For years, the goal has been getting to $100 billion annually by 2020 to aid developing nations. And countries wanted assurances that the support would go beyond 2020. Analyst Alex Mizoni says that both goals were met.
The finance deal on the table is a step in the right direction. It makes sure that there will be $100 billion per year after 2020 and until 2025, so we have that certainty, that kind of predictability. And then after 2025, we have another process to set a new financial goal.
And there is increased transparency on how climate finance funds are defined, where the money comes from, and where it goes. With these pillars of the agreement, more than 2 decades worth of diplomatic efforts are now transformed into reality at COP21. Above all, the message that this agreement intends to send the world is that the era of fossil fuel-dependent economic growth is coming to an end.
This deal here really crystallized there's no future for them. And I think next few days we'll see how the shares of fossil fuel companies goes down and the renewable companies come up. And that's the real sign that we want to give, the sign for the market.
A sign of things to come after this historic moment in Paris. I'm Saroja Coelho for GreenTV.